Now, President Muhammadu Buhari has relieved 2 ministers of their appointments. They are the Ministers of Agriculture, Mohammed Nanono, and his power counterpart, Salih Maman. This is the first time the president is reshuffling his cabinet since he assumed office in 2015. Some other ministers also switched roles. Mohammed Mahmoud Abubakar, the Minister of Environment, is now to assume office as the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. Abubakar Liu, the Minister of State for Works and Housing, will take over as the Minister of Power. Joining me to make sense of some of these issues is a public affairs analyst, Adeniyi Kunnu. Adeniyi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Thank you for
Great.
Yeah.
Now, there has been a lot of reactions from Nigerians. Just when people were saying, we need to see more action, the president gave them some little action there. But but I wonder what you make, though. So we have talked to a lot of people concerning this, and a lot of people said that, in fact, there need to be more reshuffling, and some other ministers will even have to go. Yes. These are comments from different people. But I wonder what you make of this.
Well, I think it's important for a man to, do a review. Being the commander-in-chief, he did a review and found that those who were his foot soldiers didn't perhaps walk up with the pace he wants them to. But I think for many people, let's understand that this is not the first one. Let's know that some ministers were carried into the second term of the president. Part of those who didn't survive it was actually the former Minister of Defense. So let people also remember that reshuffling of the cabinet means that whilst you're in power, some other people were left to go while some other persons were brought in. Don't also forget that the reshuffling itself affected Fashola. He had 3 ministries, now he had 2. So that's part of the reshuffling, even if he's still in power. But for the 2 persons removed, we've heard 1,001 reasons. But for those who have been, I beg you, but for those who have been following that story, one of the things I found out was that the former Minister of Power, even in his local government, was accused of bringing virtually, a lot of government property there because he wants to set up power. So if the president says we will work on power, we will ensure that, businesses boom, we expect that the economy thrive. Don't forget, every successful economy is based on power because power enhances productivity there. But Salih Maman, long before now, that's about a year ago, has been accused of many things that do not perhaps go with the blueprint or the strategy of Mr. President. So that's it for him. Now, Nanono, the former agriculture minister, don't forget that another person held that office before him, Audu Ogbe did, and he was told bye-bye at some point. That's reshuffling also. But for Salih Maman, one of the things that I found out was when they talk about certain group of farmers across states that should have access to certain provisions of government. Under his administration, we found out that rather than, for instance, in Lagos, one of the things that was unveiled was that, and this happened about 4 or 5 months ago, that the group of farmers that were recognized as the cooperative of farmers in Lagos that were supposed to have access to certain things, they didn't have access to it. So rather, it made some other groups that were not actually farmers. That has been there.
Like the one they call portfolio farmers.
Yeah, so the people that were his own foot soldiers as well didn't do what they were supposed to do. For many people, they just saw this. There were lots of things that happened that resulted in that. In Kunnu, for instance, the federal government made provision for certain farm implements that were given to people through the head of cooperatives and the rest of them. But they found out that those they gave it to for onward transmission to farmers did abracadabra with it, such that they were lending it for a fee. That is not something coming out now, but I'm telling those who care to know that that's part of it. And Kunnu is significant in this country in terms of its population. So you can imagine how many farmers were left out of what they should have benefited from in that same Kunnu. Of course, the EFCC arm in Kunnu did an investigation and had to make sure that some people come to answer for their questions. And I'm telling you, that's also there for people who perhaps know how to dig a little more. So both of them left because they didn't quite measure up. And I feel that if we're to check at the same time, you want to ask me, it may not sound proper to some people, but the Minister of Defense himself also that should be Megishi, also should be called to question. Anyway, don't forget that this is not the end of the reshuffling. We know that they'll be having, some parleys sooner than later. It is not as if the man as an individual is not competent. It is one thing to be intelligent. It's another thing to write the exam and pass the examination. So when you're intelligent and you cannot translate your intelligence, into success in exams or transmitting that knowledge to people who should also learn from you, it's a problem. The defense minister also has a lot of things that he perhaps doesn't have a grasp of. First is age. What is an understanding of the current warfare that the country is into? So if we do a proper check, you'd have to agree with me that there are certain ministers that would also go. Up until this time, even the Minister of the Environment that was moved to another ministry, what's his impact? That's another question. This year, we're talking about lots of things that deal with the aspect of, flooding and all of that. The Minister of Environment do not understand that that's part of his work. When you say you are moving people away from areas that are flooded to areas where people can be safe for a while, what is the provision that has been made such that the people you are moving away from their ancestral land are safe somewhere until the flood recedes? These are literally the questions.
Part of the concern a lot of people have is the issue of creating awareness.
Yes.
As to what people should do, how they should react on their own, even before any assistance comes.
That's the truth. And I think that whilst the Minister of the Environment takes the blame for that, many other states should think out of the box to understand that this issue of heavy rainfall is a perennial thing, and provision is important to be made before the time comes. So what I need to say here is, if the president sat back and do a proper review, he would agree with me that there are lots of people who should go, not because as individuals they perhaps do not understand their onions, but when it comes to understanding the vision and mission of the person who appointed them, they perhaps have gone another way. So there are lots of things that have happened. Then if you look at the former Minister of Power, another thing that we learned from the peripheral stories was he removed lots of people that should have helped him interpret the vision of the president. He did lots of things. Then let me say this. The former Minister of Agriculture, Adeniyi, on a couple of occasions I've had a one-on-one conversation with him. With every sense of respect, he may not have, fulfilled his terms of reference from the person who appointed him, but he seemed to have a grasp of agriculture that the current
he's a farmer.
Yes,
he's a farmer.
And I tell you, his level of knowledge of agriculture. But when you are talking about political appointments, there are always 1,001 reasons why somebody has to go and another person should come in. In fact, I have to say there that if we're to do a comparative analysis of the performance of Adeniyi finished his time as minister. So for you not to finish your term, it means the person that was there before you actually performed better. That's why they didn't remove him halfway.
But a case of cabinet reshuffle,
yes,
and sometimes even the issue of letting some people go,
yes,
in the case of these two ministers, does it always portend the issue of incompetence?
Not quite.
Okay.
Let me tell you this. You could start a warfare and you put 50 soldiers at the war front to actually extinguish your enemy because you have perhaps knowledge A of your opponents. And in the course of the battle, you found out that there were certain people put on the side of the flanks as your enemy. You may have to pull up 100 men more, not because the 50 men were incompetent, but for you not to be overcrowded. For instance, let's look at France 98. Emejake took more midfielders than any other team did at that World Cup, or perhaps a few other teams. And what did he do at the final of the World Cup to have earned France their first World Cup was that he flooded the midfield. They annihilated the main man who had concussion in person of Ronaldo. So you found out that the strategy with which they played teams like Chile, like some other teams, was not the same strategy employed when they played Brazil. So for the president, for instance, he perhaps felt when these persons came on board, they understood what he wanted. And he allowed the first year and felt, well, maybe they're still settling in. But by the second year, the pressure...
4 years. Yes. Trying to settle in.
Yes. Well, the reality is, don't forget that the attempts people make when it comes to resolving issues or solving problems differ. And that is why some people appear to be more competent than the others. Even if we did an assessment of the current ministers. Now, okay, let's look at the current Minister of Finance and the previous Minister of Finance. She's there, but she had borrowed more. Our predecessor has shown a better understanding of how to engage with perhaps agencies, ministries, and parastatals under the Ministry of Finance. But for her, while she also had a grasp to an extent, she perhaps comparatively may not be described as more competent as her predecessor. That's a fact, and for people to see. I therefore want to say that it may not be the case of incompetence or not in all instances, but from the records we have that can be accessed, and from the records that some of us did extra research to assess, these people that have been let go perhaps fell short in terms of competence.
All right. Now, if you look at from your perspective and
yes,
opinion,
please.
If you look at all the ministries, because we assume that all ministries, as they are constituted, affect the Nigerian life in all areas.
Of course.
By the time all ministries perform excellently, the life of an average Nigerian will become something, Well, what areas do you think should be fortified? If the president, you're talking about strategy and tactics the other time. If the president has to be very tactical and very strategic or very intentional and deliberate, what ministries do you think he should put more effort into?
I think power still remains number one. There is no nation in the world that has recorded successes in terms of our economy if there's no power. That simply means people should be able to have power around the clock, such that in the middle of the night, if you have to do certain jobs ahead of people that will patronize you in the morning, you already got it ready in the middle of the night. So power around the clock is something we cannot shy away from. You're talking about economy. Most definitely that's another one. Because the reason I'm talking about this administration had a tripod that they gave to Nigerians that they were going to work on. Security happens to be one. They talked about the economy. And, three.
Fight against corruption.
Yes, fight against corruption. So if you're talking about that aspect of what they told us, so let's work with the blueprints that they perhaps feel they will work on to get things going. So when we talk about economy, fantastically, we have 5.2% health state of the economy. But comparatively, between now and last year, we had more money than this year, even if last year it was less. It's over 4% or thereabout. In fact, the projection tells us that in 2022, we're going to have about 4.6%, healthier state of our economy compared to 5.2. So next year, except of course we have more money, if the economy, for instance, now poses, a positive of about 5.2%, and you have, let me say, $1 billion, and next year, you have an increase of the economy, but you have maybe $800 million US, you've now made a success, even if the economy is better. So volume also matters. So moving away from the economy, you're talking about security. It has to be emphasized here that nobody invests in any economy that cannot be described as safe. It may be difficult for the president to tell the current service chiefs to pack their bags and go. But the reality remains that those that should be dealt with must be dealt with. For instance, people attacked the nation's prime security institutions. Yeah. Although from what we heard from the Army Public Relations Officer yesterday was that some persons have been arrested. But they need to speed up their prosecution. It's an assault and an insult. In terms of corruption.
In fact, just to chip this in.
Yes, please.
A lot of people feel that it shouldn't even have happened in the first place.
That's another, let me say this, that's another kettle of fish. From those who understand security better than myself, they said they could even, that from some findings, the people that actually did that were not far from, for people who have been to Kaduna, it's quite an expanse of land. And ins and outs, perhaps the people who did that job have insiders. So why did that happen? That means there's something wrong with intelligence within the nation's defense force. That's two. Then we're talking about corruption. Many months ago, 400 bureau de change persons were helping to launder money for those killing Nigerians. And it appears as if they want everybody to suffer amnesia and forget that those people should be tried and sent to the deepest part of jail. Let me say this. I'm a Nigerian. I served in the North. I've lived in the North. Till today, I have people that I have kept relationship with for many years that are good people from the north. Some of my family members have lived in the north for many years. So first, I'm not an advocate of the division of this country, but I'm an advocate of being fair and just and being decisive. If this president, if this administration wants corruption to be fought to its death, those bureau de change operators that are being oiled and kept somewhere must be tried in people should know per second of what the nation is doing to them. If this administration is working so hard, fighting every day, losing men every day, why will you keep people that are helping to launder money for those killing Nigerians? So corruption that this administration talks about, because that's also corruption.
Yeah.
When people launder money for those who are killing Nigerians, you must address it. When we talk about power, be sincere. Let's tell ourselves the truth. When they did the unbundling of this particular power sector, you need to ask a question. Who were the people that had access to it? Professor Basonaji, the Minister of Power under Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, got a sack because he had certain levels of interest and he was sent packing. I'm saying that since the ministry itself was taken from another person, Fashola, what really have happened between that and because for them to have told Nanono to go, it means that his superior actually did a better job. So basically, talking about power to help economy, small businesses, talking about corruption, you have to do that. Then you must also think out of the box to engage young people and get them employed as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Adeniyi Kunnu, for your insight into this. We look forward to how things are going to be, because you said, well, this may not be the last yet.
No.
Yeah, or you may also,
it's not the last.
It may not also mean that more ministers are going to go, or more new ones are going to go,
could happen.
or whatever. The point there is, Nigerians just want effectiveness. They just want to feel the impact of government. That's all.
That's all we need. And let me say, please, as I leave this place,
just 1 second.
for people who work in government service, let's forget that every civil servant who fails to do his or her job will reflect the positive or negative of government service. Civil servants are foot soldiers of the federal government. So they don't work with government and think, let's get government job for security and not do the work. It's important.
That's really true. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Right.